Pokemon Emerald Seaglass is a Gen 3 ROM hack that restyles the entire Hoenn region in the beautiful art style of Gen 2. And as soon as I saw there was a hard mode that adds new Pokemon to the gym leader teams, I knew I had to try and beat a hardcore Nuzlocke, meaning if any of my Pokemon should faint, they'll have to be boxed forever. And I only get to catch the first Pokemon I find per route. And I'm gonna be doing this challenge completely blind to whatever changes have been made, meaning I'm gonna have to try and make the best possible choices, which admittedly is not one of my talents. For our first choice, we could pick Torchic, the chicken that Kentucky fries itself. Then there's Edamame Butt over here, but we all know the best choice in Hoenn has always been the Kipster. Hate to do it, IGN, but I'm adding just a little bit more water to Hoenn. And look at how cute he is following me around. Let's be honest, this should have been a feature in every game after Heart Gold Soul Silver. What are you doing, Game Freak? I then go and defeat May, whose Trico is level 6 since this is hard mode, which gives us access to Pokeballs, meaning I can go after my first encounter on Route 103. This early in the game, we're basically looking for anything, but getting Wingull is awesome since it's super effective against both the first and second gym. This is such a beautiful game. I wish I could just take it with me and play it all the time. Wait a second, I could, with this video's sponsor, REDMAGIC, a series of mobile devices committed to providing players the ultimate gaming experience. And they've just released their first ever tablet, the REDMAGIC Nova Gaming Tablet, which is the most powerful gaming tablet ever made, designed to deliver unmatched performance and immersive gameplay for the most demanding players. And with a Snapdragon Gen 3 processor and incredible cooling system, it truly can. Naturally, just like I've stress tested previous REDMAGIC models, I loaded up Bloons TD6 and spammed as many laggy towers as I could. But instead of succeeding with my lag mission, I simply had an awesome time gaming. I also booted up Minecraft for some TNT shenanigans, but even then, I had no lag and completely seamless frame rate. Heck, the cooling system never even let the thing heat up. Most of all, it was super exciting to play Pokemon on the go, and I even started a new Pokemon Radical Red run to practice hardcore mode. So if you're looking for the top-end mobile gaming experience, I can truly recommend the REDMAGIC Nova Gaming Tablet, available now by clicking the link in the description or pinned comment below. Our adventure continues onwards to Route 102, where we can pick up our next encounter, the Psychic and Fairy-type Ralts. Not only is this game added the Fairy typing, but we also have the physical special split. And the fact that all water moves aren't special by default makes our next encounter on Route 104 a whole lot better. In Gen 3, Huge Power Marill basically had Body Slam and Rollout, and that's about it. But with the added Fairy type and physical water moves, this is our best encounter yet. I then head to Petalburg Woods to hopefully pick up a Wurmple for the second gym, but I will certainly take Shroomish. It's then I get my very first taste of difficulty. You see, unlike the pathetic Aqua Grunt you face in base Emerald, this guy's got a Whalmer. And while my team has no problem facing water types, this thing has Rollout. This puts me in a terrible spot where I can't afford to switch or else I'll lose something, so I go for Supersonic, but I end up missing. The only reason Wingull survives is because Whalmer misses too. Now that I won't get hit by a powered up Rollout, I can safely switch to Gaia, who dodges another Rollout before paralyzing Whalmer with Stun Spore. This way, I maximize the chance that Whalmer fails to continue its rollout streak and safely take it out with Absorbs. And hey, if this is the type of change that's been made to a measly Aqua Grunt, I'm really excited to see the gym leaders. But before taking on Roxanne, I head north to Route 116 to round out our team of 6 with a Nidoran male. With 3 water types and a grass type, our team is very well set up to take on Roxanne, and we immediately get to see one of the team upgrades as she sends in Anorith, which actually makes a ton of sense since you revive the fossils in Rustboro. As Anorith sets up its defense with Harden, I go for Rain Dance to boost the power of my water type moves, which amazingly almost makes Water Gun a one-hit KO. I seriously must have left the thing at like 1 HP, but a second Water Gun does the job. She then predictably sends in Lileep, which is bad news for our team of water types. So I switch to Hercules as Lileep misses a Rock Tomb and go for a double kick. I decide to just go for it a couple more times and take Lileep out the simple way. In comes Nose Pass, and before switching out, I decide to try my luck with a Poison Sting, which ends up working out beautifully with an instant poison. Then, because Nosepass missed its previous Rock Tomb, I can afford to stay in and take 1 hit, giving me the chance to get in 1 free double kick, which does a lot less damage than I was hoping for. So I swap out into Marill, who immediately gets buried in a Rock Tomb, which unfortunately means he has to take another Rock Tomb the next turn since I'm now slower. We then have a bit of a standoff as we both heal with Oran Berries, which unfortunately takes Nosepass out of the range of being taken out by Bubble Beam plus Poison. So instead I have to switch out, sending in Gaia, who after being hit by Rock Tomb is also slower than Nosepass, taking a second hit before finishing the job and collecting our first gym badge with a Mega Drain. With our first badge collected, the level cap increases to 19. Well, actually 20. I just didn't know that going in blind, but either way, the increased cap does wonders for our team since we can first evolve our starter into Marshtomp, giving us a great answer to Watson, and Hercules into Nidorino. I then head to Rusturf Tunnel to save Pico, where the only encounter we can get is, of course, Whismur. So naturally, I pick up a Swinub. Mr. Briny then brings me on his yacht and takes me to Dewford Town. The major change to this location is we can get an encounter in this sand patch where I find a Taillow. In case you were unaware, Taillow is possibly the best encounter you can get in any Pokemon Emerald Nuzlocke, so you could understandably see why I'd be super excited to get one. The reason Taillow's so good is because it's super fast, has the Guts ability to power up its attack stat, which stacks with Stab Facade, which is why after I evolve Meryl into Azumarill, I head back to Petalburg Woods, where I find this Weedle and make sure it gets me poisoned. Normally, having a Taillow at this point in the game is GG for Brawly, and his first Pokemon Makuhita gets to immediately feel Taillow's wrath. But then Brawly sends in a level 20 Heracross. But Heracross is quad weak to flying. However, after setting up a bulk up to boost both its attack and defense, a single quad effective wing attack is not enough to take it out. It even gets back above half health with a Citrus Berry. With an attack boost, I'm pretty sure this Heracross can one-shot Taillow no matter what fighting move it has. So I swap to Wingull, which is when I learned Heracross has Bullet Seed. Unsurprisingly, this means the end for Wingull, and the only Pokemon I have left that doesn't get one shot is Hercules. But with the defense boost, Heracross is just too tanky to take out. And unfortunately, the rest of my team is kinda screwed against this buffed up monster. Even Azumarill, who's a pretty bulky Pokemon, goes down to just 3. Except Heracross only hits Pontus 2 times, meaning not only Azumarill, but the entire run survives. Brawly's final Pokemon is his classic Meta-type, but I get to send in Taillow for free as he uselessly sets up Light Screen and then gets picked off in one hit by a Guts-boosted wing attack. But our victory certainly came at a cost. So in search of new team members, I head to Route 107 and use my Old Rod to find myself a Magikarp, which unlike Taillow is pretty much the best Nuzlocke encounter you can get no matter what game you're playing, even though it's pretty much completely useless against the next gym. Speaking of Pokemon that won't help us with the next gym, we can evolve Taillow into Swellow and evolve Gaia into the much more immediately useful Breloom. I then go to pick up some new encounters, starting in Granite Cave where I predictably find a Zubat. My name is Steven. I'm interested in rare stones. Yeah, so was your mom when she was I'm sorry, is this a Gulpin D's Nuts joke in 2024? Yeah, I'm sorry. It was supposed to be like a cute little transition of me getting Gulpin as my encounter on Route 105. I'm sorry. You're sorry? You've advanced your plot at the expense of my dear mother. Mention her again and I'll pound you with my dilly. Excuse me, what? After acquiring Gulpin, we take on the third gym leader, Watson. He leads with Volbeat, which has been given the electric type. However, because Poseidon is part ground type, the worst thing it can do to us is Infestation, allowing me to easily bury it under a few rock tombs. Watson then sends in his ace Manectric, and fearing it has something ridiculous like HP Grass, I send in Tartarus. Manectric then goes for Thunder Wave to get me paralyzed, and I go for Yawn to hopefully put Manectric to sleep the next turn. However, my Yawn goes completely wasted since the sludge I follow it with gets the poison. I then continue my onslaught of sludges since Manectric doesn't seem to want to do anything to me except go for Howl, and once it actually attacks me, it goes for a special attack, which I lock it into with Encore. Because Manectric is now locked into going for an electric type move, I can easily swap in Swinub to dodge the Shockwave and let Manectric go down to poison. Flaffy comes in third, and I figure what can this thing do to a Swinub, so I stay in and go for Mud Bomb as I get slowed down by Cotton Spore. Flaffy then goes for Power Gem, which is the answer to my question of what Flaffy can do to a Swinub. So after nearly taking Flaffy out with a second Mud Bomb, I swap out into Gaia, who knocks out Flaffy with a Headbutt. Finally, there's Magneton, and I should have probably just gone for Mach Punch here, but instead I set up Leech Seed as Magneton paralyzes me with Thunder Wave. I then go for Mach Punch, proving that it would have been a 2-hit KO, and I really should have gone for it last turn, especially since I now hit myself in confusion and take 20 points of damage from Sonic Boom. But after Leech Seed recovery, I feel comfortable risking it and take out Magneton with another Mach Punch, getting us our third gym badge. I then travel west to Route 17 where my encounter is a Togepi. I then move through Route 112 where I pick up Persephone the Houndour, and very predictably on Route 113, of course I find a Spinda. Oh dear god, not Slugma's Gen 2 sprite! I then follow the path through Route 113 where I pick up a Swablu. This eventually leads me to Meteor Falls where we can find our next encounter. And I hung out in this stupid cave for what must have been 15 minutes, only ever running into Nidorans or Zubats. I was hoping to get anything else, Lunatone, Solrock, maybe they'd put Clefairy in here, but I kept running into Nidoran, and eventually even the occasional Nidorino. In fact, here's just a sped up uncut clip of me running into nothing but Zubat and Nidoran males. For the life of me, I couldn't even find a Nidoran female until I found something I wasn't expecting. Normally, you've got to climb the waterfall and go to the very back of the cave to get Bagon, so I was certainly caught off guard. But that is not me complaining. I then head south to Route 115 where I find an Eevee, which is also great. Next we face Flannery, and I try to set up the rain the very first turn, but the cursed Gen 2 Slugma is 2 steps ahead and ends up setting up the sun the very same turn. This is kind of wasting a turn on my part, and I should have just attacked, but at least I can go for Rain Dance the next turn since there's no risk of Slugma going for Sunny Day again. I don't know how Slugma's beta sprite made it into the full release of Gold and Silver, but Slugma does not have eyes on its ears like that. After I dispose of the Abomination, Flannery sends in Flareon, which immediately sets up the sun, powering down my Aqua Tail. But even so, with huge power, Aqua Tail does a huge amount of damage, almost taking Flareon into the red in the sun. Unfortunately, Flareon gets some health back with a Citrus Berry. In fact, it's just enough so that after an attack drop from a super effective Trop Kick, an Aqua Tail falls just short of getting the KO, so the next turn I'm forced to switch, sending in Icarus. This way we can very comfortably tank the resisted Grass type move with a nice amount of HP, and then take out Flareon with a U-turn to get a free switch as if this were set mode. Flannery then sends in her ace Torkoal, and I go for Rain Dance once again to power down her fire type moves. And unfortunately, since Poseidon is male, I've got to deal with Attract. My first turn is very fortunate since I managed to break through Love and land a rain boosted Water Pulse for more than half damage. Torkoal then sets up Sunny Day, and I managed to break through Love once again, but in the sun, a Water Pulse just isn't enough to take Torkoal out. Because Torkoal misses Overheat, I'm able to stay in one more turn, but unfortunately I'm immobilized by Love and just get hit by Overheat. This does way over half in the sun despite being resisted, and even though Torkoal lowers its special attack, with a White Herb, we're still in danger. With one more full power Overheat coming my way, I swap into Thalassa, who tanks it way better than Marshtomp. At such low health, despite the sun, I can finish Torkoal off with a Water Pulse, and her final Pokemon being Camerupt gets us an easy 4th gym badge. Then before Norman, I am able to go get and revive a fossil, but without being able to evolve them fully, they're not really of much use. So I go into the fight versus my father with the team I have. If you know what you're doing at all, Norman should really never be a difficult fight. I run into some annoying RNG, like getting Teeter Danced after I go for Leech Seed, so I end up swapping in Icarus, and I end up flying just a little bit too close to the sun as an Aerial Ace fails to take out Spinda, and it confuses me with Teeter Dance. Staying in here is super risky and a big mistake on my part, since that Facade could have easily crit, and that would have been the end of Icarus. I don't think I could have ever forgiven myself if I would have lost my best Pokemon to a Spinda. After Spinda goes down to Leech Seed, we face Slacking, so I swap into Gaia, who gets immediately crit by a Facade and taken down to just 10 HP. I then go for Leech Seed, and thankfully I got Gaia pre-poisoned in Petalburg Woods, which activates our Poison Heal ability, and together with Leech Seed, that is a whole lot of recovery per turn. Then since we can buy the TM for Protect at this point, I can easily just protect every single turn Slacking would attack, and then go for Power Up Punch the turns it's loafing around, to get myself to +2 attack, and then finish it off with a Mach Punch. In this Romhack, Politoed has been turned into a normal type, which I actually think is super fitting, especially since Politoed loves to spam Body Slam. In this case, Norman has given his Politoed a Quick Claw to outspeed and try and paralyze us, but since we're already pre-poisoned, there's no way to actually go through with his strategy, and he's easily beaten. Against his Vigoroth, I can just use a +3 Mach Punch to very easily get our 5th gym badge. With Norman defeated, I unlock the new Mauville quest from Watson in Mauville City. Here I find my next encounter, which is perfect for the next gym leader, Helios the Voltorb. I then turn off the generator, thus completing the quest and receiving Thunderbolt from Watson, which makes this the perfect opportunity to evolve Eevee into Jolteon. And our latest 2 encounters, Jolteon and Electrode, make Winona a light breeze. After I immediately zap her Fearow out of the sky, die, she sends out Tropius, so I Volt Switch out into Tartarus. Tropius really can't touch my poison type, so I take it out with a couple of Sludge Bombs before Winona sends in Skarmory. It did scare me to see the Flying Gem, but after seeing the boosted damage from Aerial Ace, I felt confident I could stay in. This results in Skarmory getting a critical hit Steel Wing the next turn, taking Tartarus into the red. So after landing another Shockwave, I swap out into Hyperion. This way I can easily tank the Steel Wing and take out Skarmory the following turn with another Shockwave. For some reason, Winona decides to send in her Pelipper next, which just gets immediately destroyed by a quad effective electric type move, and I then Volt Switch out against Altaria into Thalassa. I do this since Altaria has Earthquake in the base game, and I could dodge that with Gyarados' Flying type, but in this case, Intimidate also negates the attack boost from Dragon Dance, and with Thalassa's Ice Fang, I even managed to get a Freeze. This completely trivializes the fight versus Altaria, and I collect my 6th gym badge without any casualties. With the new level cap, we're finally able to evolve our starter into the Scourge of Hoenn, Swampert. I then move on to Mount Pyre, where our encounter is predictably a Shuppet, which is much better than the Sunflora I find on Route 121. I then have a battle with May that really starts to go south when I learn that Ninetales is part Fairy type. This causes Thalassa to get burned, and I even miss an Aqua Tail that would have done terrible damage in both the sun and with the burn. But Ninetales crippling Gyarados is really just the preview to my main problem, Sceptile. Of course I was expecting it to go for a grass move against Swampert, so when Icarus gets slashed, I need to swap again to Tartarus. And my boy does way better than I expected, able to tank a slash at 33 HP and fire back with a huge Sludge Bomb before unfortunately falling. But even with Tartarus's selfless heroism, we're still in big trouble. Sceptile isn't low enough here that I'm confident I can take it out with a non-guts boosted quick attack from Swellow, so instead I go for Volt Switch to get some chip damage and swap into Zeus. Her only other Pokemon is Pelipper, which sets up the rain before getting completely destroyed. I then use Volt Switch again to get Sceptile into the red, and even though quick attack could definitely take it out at this point, Icarus would have to be hit as I switch it in, so I really can't afford to send in anybody except Hyperion. I'm hit by a Cross Poison on the switch, and Sceptile being Grass Dragon, I'm unsure if any of my electric type moves are gonna be able to do the job. So unfortunately, I'm left with only one choice. And the lengths I'm willing to go to leave May speechless. After that unfortunate loss of our dutiful comrades, I head to Magma Hideout, where Maxie is a nice break from the difficulty since he's got no chance against our team of water types. I then go to Slateport to do some shopping and find this guy who flies me to Pacifidlog Town. Just like in Dewford, you can now get an encounter here where I find one of my favorite Pokemon, Scyther. And because I've already picked up a Metal Coat during my travels, I can immediately evolve it into Scizor. With the Technician ability, this thing is a monster, and it's a fantastic pickup just before Tate and Liza. But before fighting them, I make sure to evolve Shuppet into Banette, who's now a Ghost Normal type. Just like in Base Emerald, Tate and Liza have 4 Pokemon, but immediately we see a difference with Mismagius instead of Xatu. Immediately Mismagius goes for the twins' signature move and sets up with Calm Mind. This makes me very much regret that I didn't go for Crunch and Darkest Lariat into Mismagius, since that would have definitely taken it out. However, I've still got some tricks up my sleeve, going for Priority Sucker Punch the next turn to finish off Mismagius before it can deal any damage. Lunatone then does the weird Gen 3 thing where it comes in during the middle of the turn, which means it gets hit by a Crunch immediately after it comes out. Claydol then goes for Earthquake, which doesn't hit its ally because of Levitate, and both of my Pokemon take a huge amount of damage, so I've got to swap out into Scizor. I then use Rage Fist with Banette, which is enough to take Claydol out, sending in Solrock. Unfortunately, Lunatone has yet to make its move and takes out Banette with Psychic. I then go for Metal Claw, which deals enough damage to Solrock to activate its Citrus Berry before it goes for Sunny Day. This would power down my Aqua Tail from Azumarill, but I get put to sleep before I even get to move, so I'm forced to swap out into Thalassa. I then finish off Solrock with a Bullet Punch, and after Lunatone sets up Calm Mind, an Aqua Tail isn't quite enough to take it out in the sun, but Scizor can easily finish the job and collect our 7th gym badge with a Metal Claw. Normally, we'd have a multi-battle with Steven, but I seem to have really offended the guy earlier, so instead, it seems to just be a double battle between me and Maxie, which is not something I prepared for. Immediately, Persephone is in grave danger versus Gliscor, so I swap out into Thalassa to lower Gliscor and Crobat's attack with Intimidate. But Crobat gets around the attack drop by hitting Azumarill with a super effective Venoshock, and at the end of the turn, I hit Gliscor for a huge liquidation. For some reason, Crobat switches up its target into Thalassa, which deals much less damage before I hit it with an Ice Fang for about half. Gliscor then doubles up with the poison move into Gyarados before Azumarill takes it out. In comes Shiftry, and expecting it to go for a grass move into Azumarill, I go for Protect, which just ends up dodging a fake out. Crobat then hits Gyarados again with a Venoshock before I take Shiftry below half with an Ice Fang, and since Azumarill is now in big trouble, I swap out into Persephone, who's gotta take a Venoshock on the switch. Shiftry then gets outsped, so I assume it went for something like Whirlwind, but I'm glad Thalassa got to take it out. Once Camerupt shows up to replace it, Persephone is once again in grave danger, so I swap out into Poseidon, who's gotta tank a Venoshock, and Thalassa immediately destroys Camerupt with a quad-effective Aqua Tail before we even get hit. Ursaluna comes out next, and is definitely not a Pokemon I was expecting to see in a Gen 3 Romhack. I desperately try to take it out by doubling into it with water moves, but it's just not enough, and Swampert gets yawned. With Thalassa at such low health, I swap out into Persephone, who immediately gets hit by a Venoshock, before Poseidon disappointingly fails to take out either of the opponents with a Rock Slide. Sadly, this means our girl's gotta take a Facade, and Persephone returns to the underworld. Poseidon also falls asleep before Artemis finishes off Ursaluna the next turn with a Bullet Punch. This brings in Dodrio before Artemis gets hit by a Leech Life. I then swap in Gyarados, the idea here being to intimidate and lower Dodrio's attack, but this plan backfires completely, because Dodrio instantly nails me with Galarian Zapdos' signature move, Thunderous Kick. The fact that Dodrio has been turned into an electric type didn't even dawn on me until Poseidon hit it with a Rock Slide that barely did anything. At the very least, we took out Crobat, leaving Dodrio as Maxie's final Pokemon. Scizor gets hit with a Thunderous Kick before firing back with a non-effective X-Scissor, which does just enough to put Dodrio in range of being taken out by Water Pulse. And sure, we beat Maxie, but at the cost of two of our best Pokemon. After the fight, I make my way to Seafloor Cavern, where my fight versus Archie is a whole lot more chill. Kyogre then flies away, and the two of us are equally baffled. Because this starts the end of the world, I've got to pay a visit to a certain ozone-dwelling sock puppet to make sure he descends from the heavens to convince this crazy pair to stop bickering by telling Groudon he's ridiculously outmatched, is just what I've always assumed. You are standing in water, my guy, which you are cripplingly weak to. It's time to calm down, dude. And I then get a crazy dopamine rush by completing this ice puzzle for children on my first try. Yeah! This leads us into the final gym battle versus Juan. He leads with a Starmie, which I can immediately electrocute with Zeus. This sensibly leads him to send in Whiscash, so I swap out into Gaia, who can easily take it out with a quad-effective Bullet Seed. Kingdra comes out third, which I somehow managed to outspeed and hit with a Leech Seed. And then Kingdra uses Ice Beam, and as soon as I saw Ice Gem activation, I knew it was game over for Gaia. And I really wanted to bring her to the Elite Four. Oh well, at least I can send in Azumarill, who basically can't be hurt by this Kingdra, and fire back with a Play Rough that almost takes it out, leaving Gaia one final KO post-mortem through Leech Seed. Fourth out is Octillery, so I swap out into Zeus, who eats a Water Pulse as I switch in, and then goes for Thunderbolt for a clean one-hit KO. Unfortunately, Zeus didn't have quite enough firepower to outgun Octillery, and to rub salt in the wound, we're taken out by a move with less than stellar accuracy. Unfortunately, this means Juan has taken out my two best answers to Wallace, and while my remaining team members can easily finish off the fight, but now we'll have to construct a new team. And to start us off, I evolved the Bagon we found in Meteor Falls into Salamence. Oh, and I find this shiny Wingull, which I would catch due to Shiny Claws, but can't because Dupe's Claws overrides it. I then start heading through Victory Road, where my first encounter is the very usable Haunter. Once I reach the Pokemon League, we've gotta decide which Pokemon to actually bring. So I head to Sootopolis City to pick up a Linking Cord and a Shiny Stone, which allow me to evolve Eros into Togekiss and Hades into Gengar. As my last preparation, I head back to Petalburg Woods one final time to get Icarus poisoned before entering the Elite Four. My philosophy going into the Elite Four is I kind of wanted to over-prepare for Drake. Going in blind against a Dragon-type master is terrifying, so I made sure to bring two Fairy types and a Steel type. That Steel type, also being Bug, really helps me out in the first fight versus Sydney, since after Icarus defeats Mightyena with a U-turn, Artemis basically just tears through the rest of Sydney's team. But hey, Sydney's never been much of a roadblock. The second fight is versus Phoebe, and the only preparation I can do is based off of Emerald and the Gen 6 remakes. In those those games, her Dusclops tends to be super annoying and go for either Protect or Confuse Ray. In this Elite Four run, I don't have a lot of great items to give my Pokemon since I don't know where to find them blind. The one thing I do have is a lot of berries, so I gave Hades a Lumberry to get rid of potential confusion and can take out Dusclops with a second Shadow Ball. Banette comes in second, and I thankfully know that it's part normal type by having owned one myself. So instead of staying in like a dummy and trying to go for Shadow Ball, I swap out into Aries, who nearly one-shots Banette with a Crunch. Sure, I've got to take a Facade, but it's a small price to pay to finish off Banette the next turn. Third out is Dusknoir, and Phoebe's Dusknoir in Gen 6 does have Ice Punch, so I immediately swap out into Azumarill, who's instead hit by an Ice Beam. I follow that up the next turn with a Liquidation that does a huge amount of damage due to being a critical hit, but Dusknoir gets back above half with a Citrus Berry before going for Earthquake. I try going for Liquidation again, but non-crit damage just isn't enough to take Dusknoir out, so I get hit by another Earthquake. I could just take Dusknoir out here, but I decide to swap in Arrows to dodge an Earthquake instead and finish it off with Air Slash. Little did I know, of course Phoebe has a Frostlass, so I swap out into Artemis, who unfortunately gets burned on the switch. I guess Phoebe's just 2 steps ahead. I then panicked as she goes for Infernal Parade since I thought it was a fire move, but I managed to survive it with just enough HP to survive burn so that I can swap out into Arrows. Losing Artemis there would have been an absolute disaster since it's basically my only answer to Glacia. Frostlass then commits to the bit by going for Will-O-Wisp once again against Arrows, which really doesn't do anything since he's a special attacker. He's also an excellent special defender, so I stay in to tank a Moonblast from Mismagius, but disappointed with my damage output from Air Slash, I decide to swap out into Icarus. This way, I dodge a Shadow Ball on the switch and can finish off the fight with a Brave Bird. And with Phoebe defeated, we move on to the third fight versus the Ice-type Master Glacia. Her default team was always super disappointing with double Glalie and double Celios, so it's fantastic to see a lead Dugong to mix things up, even though it just gets defeated by 2 Ironheads. Cloyster is second, and here I make a big mistake staying in since Hydro Pump takes me below half, and with its massive defense, Ironhead barely does anything. Scizor is my only Pokemon that both resists and is super effective against Ice, so letting him take that much damage this early in the fight is a huge mistake. After I finish off Cloyster with an Aura Sphere, Glacia sends out Glaceon, so I swap out, sending in my only reasonable option, Azumarill. Unfortunately, Glaceon has Chilling Water, lowering our attack before we get to connect with a superpower, making it do just a bit over half, but after the attack drop from the attack itself, we're not going to be able to take Glaceon out in one hit, so I make a quick pivot switch into Gengar just to reset my attack stat, who takes quite a lot of damage from a Chilling Water, and swap back in Azumarill. Because of Hail, Blizzard is 100% accurate, and despite being resisted, still does a ton of damage. Glaceon then tries to hold on with another Chilling Water, but since we already know we're going to do over half at -1, a superpower does the job. Walrein comes in next, and I just don't have a good switch, so I stay in and just barely survive a Body Slam. All I can do is go for superpower, but at -2, it barely deals any damage. At this point, I don't have any good switches, so I send in Hades, who gets taken into the red by an Ice Beam. But at this point, I'm completely cornered. I can't swap in Eros, Icarus, or Aries since they're all cripplingly weak to Ice Beam. Pontus only has 9 HP, and it's here I really get punished for letting Artemis take so much damage earlier in the fight. Left with no other option, I use my final gambit, Destiny Bond. With Phoebe defeated, Hades has outlived his most favorable matchup, so his final action will be to return to the underworld but take Walrein with him. Thank you, Gengar. The rest of us will work hard to make sure your sacrifice wasn't in vain. With one Pokemon left to defeat, I send in Artemis as Glacia reveals Glalie. It outspeeds and goes for Crunch, but Artemis is bulky enough to tank it, retaliating with an Iron Head, and then finishing off the fight with a final Bullet Punch. And while we certainly made it through the fight, we now only have 5 Pokemon remaining to face the end game. Being unprepared for Drake's Dragons and thus crushed just before the champion would be the worst possible outcome, which is why I made sure to bring plenty of checks to Dragons. Just like versus Juan, Azumarill's Play Rough is just barely not enough to take Kingdra out, but a second one finishes the job. Drake then sends in Steelix, but it just keeps spamming Iron Defense, so eventually I knock it out with enough liquidations. Flygon comes in third, but because I didn't get damaged by Steelix, I can afford to stay in and tank an Earthquake and just one-shot it with a Play Rough. Salamence is next, and at this point I'm at such low health that I don't want to risk it and send in Arrows. Salamence luckily misses a Rock Slide on the switch since I find out the next turn it does over half before I connect with a Moonblast, which almost takes Salamence out and activates its Citrus Berry. Another Rock Slide would would take Eros out here, so I swap out into Aries, who is weak to rock, but after Intimidate, I feel fairly comfortable, and the Rock Slide still does decent damage. Even though my Salamence is lower level, I'm confident it'll move first since I have a speed boosting nature and take out Salamence with a fly. Finally, Drake has Altaria, so I send in Artemis, and the Altaria starts dragon dancing. And just like when known as Altaria, this thing doesn't know when to stop dancing, allowing me to hit it with a couple of Iron Heads to take it deep into the red and just finish it off with a Bullet Punch, meaning we've defeated the Elite Four and there's only one fight remaining. As I ascended those stairs, I knew I'd be facing the Master of Hoenn's Waters. And I may not have Zeus or Gaia, but I still intend on making it through. In my first blind attempt of Pokemon Emerald Seaglass, I had made it all the way to Champion Wallace. And to kick things off, I immediately one-shot his Wailord with a Guts-boosted Facade. I don't expect to one-shot my Milotic, so I go for a U-turn and swap out into Pontus. He ends up eating an Ice Beam on the switch, but thankfully doesn't get frozen. My Milotic then goes for Toxic, since all of its other moves are probably resisted. This gives me an almost free Play Rough, taking Milotic below half health and thus activating its Citrus Berry. Wallace then reveals he only has resisted moves by going for a Surf, and I hit my Milotic with another Play Rough to take it below half again. Pontus then gets to move first with a Quick Claw proc, but Wallace decides to switch my Milotic out, sending in Tentacruel to resist the Fairy-type Play Rough. Expecting a Sludge Bomb, I swap out into my Steel type to dodge it completely, and decide to stay in to see what type of damage Artemis can do. Unfortunately, I don't expect an Iron Head puts Tentacruel in range of being taken out by Bullet Punch, so I swap out into Aries to tank the next Hydro Pump. I can then outspeed with my speed boosting nature and take out Tentacruel with Earthquake before it gets to hit me again. Next out is Whiscash, and I don't have any grass moves on Aries, so I have to go for Dragon Claw, which doesn't quite do half. Oddly, Wallace decides to lock himself into Hyper Beam, which gives me 2 free turns since he has to recharge, which is just enough for me to take Whiscash out with a couple of Dragon Claws. Gyarados is next, and despite Intimidate, I decide to go for the quad effective Thunderfang, which I'm rewarded for with a flinch. With a second Thunderfang, Aries shows the power of a true God of War. Wallace then sends in his infamous Ludicolo, so I immediately go for a Fly, which doesn't quite take Ludicolo out because of the Intimidate. Annoyingly, Ludi sets up Leech Seed, which gives it just enough health back to survive my incoming Dragon Claw. I'm then hit by Surf, which together with Leech Seed takes Aries down to just 4 HP. Aries then finishes off Ludi with one final Dragon Claw, but with the Gen 3 mechanics that send in my Milotic before the end of the turn, we end up succumbing to Leech Seed. Aries may not have made it to the end, but the God of War paved the way for Icarus to deal the final blow against Wallace's Milotic, meaning I'd done it. I'd beat a blind Pokemon Emerald Seaglass Hardcore Nuzlocke. And I've got to say, I had a blast going through this beautiful ROM hack. So I've got to extend a big thank you to Nemo622 for making such a beautiful game. And if you're thinking of playing it yourself, I think it's a perfect way to do your first ROM hack Hardcore Nuzlocke. The game has so many awesome encounters to offer with all the new added Pokemon, giving me some of the best encounters I think I've ever had in a run. So definitely give this game a try.
You see, Taylor, he was insulting my mother through vile innuendo.
Oh no.
Yes, well, I snapped back with one of my own. Mention her again, and I'll have to pound you with my dilly.
A dilly? And what's that supposed
Well,
to...
you know, it's a sort of abbreviation for Cradilly,
which, as you know, has a rather particularly phallic visage. My dear, you see, the joke is, it's not funny when explained, but dilly sounds like dill.